Hello everyone. This is the 28th part of the story, Avatar in DC Universe. Chapter 84, Prelude to the Hunt. Aden's point of view. The old man was stubborn, I'll give you that. All I needed was confirmation. Just that. Following fictional comic book world settings, it was obvious to anyone that the white was the elemental force governing air, and maybe other various gases and airborne agents. Which meant for all my elements, there was a likely scenario that compatible parliaments existed. I could even see its influence in my air bending. As stated before, upon reaching Grand Mastery, everything had just become easier to control, aerokinetic-wise. Maybe that was the influence of the white in part with my own understanding of airbending? Who knows? What I knew, however, was that any theories I had would have to be tested further at a later time because I had a mission to complete. I looked at the countdown to the mission displayed on my upper vision. 5 hours had already gone by and I had 19 more left to kill Nemeth. I internally shook my head. Even without my former team, none of my missions ever seemed to go according to plan. No point in stressing about it though. There was nothing I could do to change things, and the good thing about all of it was that the harder shit got, the better, stronger and more experienced I would too. So I smiled and looked at the aged shaman. Fine. Keep your secrets. I like surprises anyway. He matched my smile and nodded. Good. It is wise to learn patience when you're young. A valuable lesson someone like you should take seriously. Especially since you have a very important role to play in all of this. I raised an eyebrow. More cryptic statements, old man? Trying to see if I'll rise to the bait? I asked him, already seeing through his act. The shaman laughed. No, nothing like that. I am being serious. He stopped and studied me in interest. I have never seen anyone blessed by the world like you. The power radiating off your body and spirit is awe-inspiring. I shook my head, feeling uncomfortable. What he was obviously perceiving was the elemental energy that the system processed for me to power my abilities. I wasn't a traditional avatar, and sometimes, while that had its own advantages, I had this worry that I was losing out on the true essence of what truly made the avatar, the avatar. It was a fear I always carried. What if one day I lost the system? What if it found me unworthy and chose another replacement? What if I lost all my abilities? It was why I had been so obsessed with becoming a metahuman before. A desire that had lessened over time, but it was good to know I had options. You're weighed down by worries. The aged shaman took another drag of his pipe and commented. I stared at him in surprise. Was I that easy to read? Fear makes life worth living. It's the catalyst, a tempering platform to forge your spirit into something fierce. So use it as a tool just like any, but don't let it overwhelm you. I was speechless for a few seconds. Those words had hit deep. It had been long since someone had been so understanding with me. Lucifer and Maze were a different story because, like it or not, our relationship was backed by mutual benefits. Plus theirs was a more tough love kind of thing. This guy didn't share the same connection with me, yet he tried to leave me with a valuable life lesson. I inclined my head in a nod. Thank you. I won't forget that. He hummed. See that you don't. Now tell me something, young man. What is it you seek? He questioned, changing the subject of the conversation. Finally. I am here on a hunt. A hunt for a demon called Nemeth. His eyes widened a little upon my statement. A strange look crossed his face. I see. Everything makes a lot more sense now. Come, I have something I need to show you. He rose up, stretched his muscles and walked towards the bridge. I followed him. I looked over my shoulder at the huge tree we were leaving behind and once more marveled at the feeling it gave off. We crossed the bridge and I looked down at the glowing pond in curiosity. There's something different about this pool of water. What is it? The shaman was silent for a while before he finally answered. That pool of water is known as the Waters of Rebirth, Maji Yuzuma, in Swahili and Rujiile wa Atharimo, in our true native language. Okay. Now I'm interested. What does it do? I wondered out loud. Exactly what it says. Just remember, nothing ever comes free. There is always a price. His words took on an ominous note. Normally he'd be right. However, my adaptable physique ensured that I remained the chocolate piece of hotness that I was, barring extreme conditions and stimuli. Things that were only actively meant to truly hurt me. If I could get just a single droplet into my elemental dimension, replicating it would have been possible, and I would have the equivalent of magic water that did something about rebirth. Maybe total healing no matter how hurt or injured someone was. Or true rebirth upon death. Like a maxed out Lazarus pit. Oh shit, what if this thing was just a Lazarus pit with makeup on? Even if it was, I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity to get a sample. The shaman and I managed to pass through the misty boulevard leading to the garden shrine, and I hurried to keep up pace with him. We came upon the village and I saw a massive bonfire at the middle of the village, near the huge hut. A lot of the village women and children were seated there. They bowed in respect at the shaman as we passed and threw looks of hatred and a slew of more negative emotions my way. Something had happened here. It wasn't normal for everyone to hold such distaste for outsiders like this. Why do the villagers look 2 seconds away from grabbing pitchforks and torches to lynch me? I questioned my guide. I'll explain later. For now, keep quiet and follow me. He replied. Like that we left the village and came upon the boundaries of the settlement. There were 4 lookout towers, positioned in a box-like formation along the edges of the village, each looking at one cardinal direction. 2 guards were on the one we passed by. They nodded at the shaman respectfully and paid no heed to me. Those towers had remained unused up until now. He said in a sad tone. I didn't comment, understanding that silence worked better in this situation. We stepped onto a path that wound, taking us away from the village. Although it was dark, a few flaming torches lined up the path we were walking through. The reason why the villagers abhor your presence is due to another outsider. Oh. I listened intently as he began to speak. A man by the name of Guy Lisbon. He claimed that he was a world-renowned archaeologist, looking for the fabled waters of rebirth to heal his sickness. The chief of course refused. It is against our customs after all. He noticed my confusion after looking at me over his shoulder. The ancestors inform us of the will of he who illuminates, and as I was communing with them, they noticed the darkness hiding in the outsider's soul. An inky blackness that if allowed to persist would infect the garden. Alas, the man would convince the chief to take another alternative. A trade. The waters of rebirth for a chance to kill the demon that has been plaguing our lands the past month. Saying that, he motioned out to our front, the end of the path we had taken. Once my eyes adjusted, I balked at what I was seeing. A field, barren with black smudges and dirty stagnated pools of water, spread out over hundreds of meters. The trees at the edges looked sickly and everything smelled rotten. I almost felt like puking. Sulfur. I murmured, remembering the brief crash course Maze had given me on demons. There was no denying it anymore. Nemeth was here. Or had been at least. Our entire field of crops, decimated, and the soil our ancestors toiled destroyed and made unfertile. I turned to the shaman. Why didn't you deal with this thing yourself? You possess a connection to the green. Both you and your nephew. Had you worked together, killing it or at the very least driving it away would have been possible. He shook his head and sighed. It is not as simple as that. The creature hides itself in a cave, a kilometer away from the village, and the further we are from the shrine of he who illuminates the garden, the more that connection is diluted. We are not true champions, just guardians tasked with safeguarding the shrine. Not to mention, there were only 5 of us. 2 after the chief decided to trust that man. I rubbed my forehead, getting a little more context of what was happening. Guy Lisbon. That name sounded familiar. One last question, how was he able to convince the chief? I inquired. Explosives that he and his team carried for dig site's excavation. The idea was to plant the explosions near the lair of the demon and then press on the trigger. So the chief, eager to end this threat once and for all, mobilized our warriors in one all-out attack. He trailed off. It didn't work. I finished his sentence. Now it suddenly made sense why everyone was so hostile. He gave a curt nod. None of them came back. Masali was heartbroken, and as the chief's son and a prodigy in his own right, he seeks revenge by all means. The only reasons he hasn't mobilized the younger warriors is because he is waiting on me to complete communing with the ancestors for a way forward. And that way is you. My mouth opened in shock. Me? How? Mku. Mku. A voice interrupted us. We looked towards the source and saw an old man running as quick as he could towards us. He stumbled while near and I rushed to catch him before he could faceplant on the ground. Swahili was exchanged between the shaman and the old man. The shaman cursed and spit to the ground in anger. Hey, what happened? What's going on? I asked him in urgency. The shaman tightened his hands into fists and spat out in anger. Seems like my dear nephew's patience has ran out. Half an hour ago, he took the rest of the warriors to confront the demon on their own. I ran a hand through my hair. Oh fuck. They're gonna get slaughtered. My body rose up, a breeze ruffling through my coat. What's the general direction to the cave? The shaman looked at me in the eyes, and for a second I thought he was going to stop me. Fortunately, he only nodded and pointed due east. I'll bring them back, I promised. It's time to finish this. Chapter 85, The Hunt Part 1. General point of view, 3 hours before. The holographic projector came on with a hum of energy, displaying a map of the African continent that was magnified to focus on East Africa in particular. Captain Adam pointed to a red blinking icon near the border of Kenya and Ethiopia. This is known as the Valley of Ghosts. A 20-square-mile stretch of jungle. The locals avoid it, and any settlement near the valley is at least half a mile away from the edge of the forest. The team's overseer paused to see if they were listening and continued with a nod. A picture of an attractive blond man with gray eyes and a scruffy beard appeared beside the map. Hey, I know that guy. His book was on the recommendation list for a history project I had back in school. He's a world-renowned archaeologist. An expert on ancient Egyptian customs and relics. Artemis explained. He also helped Batman on a case involving Maxi Zeus. So we can add a deep understanding of the Greek mythology as well. Robin added. His eyes widened right after his statement and he leveled a questioning glance at Captain Adam. Which means this mission must have come straight from Batman. He connected the dots. This brought about surprise as the rest of the team looked confused. Everyone except Aqualad. Wait, I thought the Dark Knight resigned from the League? Miss Martian wondered out loud. I didn't buy it for a single second. Batman pretty much runs the whole thing. Connor commented while crossing his hands. It was to my understanding that although Batman resigned, the League decided to keep him on as a close associate. He's not involved with any of the decision-making or entitled to a seat at the table but has taken on a new role as a consultant. Aqualad explained to the rest. It wasn't surprising that he knew of this, but some of the team members were slightly turned off that he kept the information to himself. Robin spared Aqualad a brief glare. Come on guys, Superboy is right. There is no way Batman would leave the Justice League. Kid Flash raised his voice. The Dark Knight is all about contingencies upon contingencies, safeguarding the Earth from any threat, external or internal. Captain Adam narrowed his eyes slightly at the speedster. The Justice League is made up of, practically gods. There are only 2 Leaguers without powers in the League. One now that Batman has left the League. He would never break ties with the League because someone needs to monitor them, to make sure that they use their powers for good. Batman was that check. Silence dominated the room. A thin trail of sweat fell down Robin's back as the implications hit him like a speeding truck. The rest were also all speechless, save for Kid Flash, who had no idea the impact his words had. What? Why is everyone so quiet all of a sudden? Captain Atom cleared his throat and decided to prioritize the mission first. The insinuation of Batman having a countermeasure for each and every member of the League was a cause for concern, but Atom could understand Batman's intentions. This would be addressed later. Moving on. Guy Lisbon is, as some of you seem to know, a famous archaeologist and a League associate who was last spotted with his team right here. A little center called Njoya. Saying that, Captain Atom pointed to a small marketplace a few miles away from the Valley of Ghosts. And he was heading towards the valley on one of his expeditions when all contact was lost with him and his team. The mission is simple. Get in, do a search and rescue. Upon finding him and his team, extract them and make it back to the watchtower. Are we clear? Atom's words were clipped and firm with soldier-like efficiency. Yes, sir. Aqualad stepped forward and nodded. One more thing. I don't need to remind you to stay in stealth mode. The Kenyan government or even Ethiopia cannot know of your presence there. Atom gave another order and Aqualad nodded. Okay, team. Let's move out. Aden's point of view. I frowned as my body shot through the sky. I knew the general direction to take, but even after flying for a few seconds I couldn't spot anything that stood out. The layout of the valley was strangely similar in all directions. Two hills that were concealed by the mist and the darkness, providing no discernible features I could reference, and the jungle itself was thick. I couldn't see the floor of the forest. I stopped in mid-air. This wasn't going to work. Looking back, my frown gave way to confusion. I couldn't even spot the village back the way I came. Okay, something is definitely up. I closed my eyes and spread out my senses. There was a slight hum in the air, a hum that was meant to confuse someone's senses. Perhaps a security measure by the tree that was in the shrine of he who illuminates the garden? Makes sense, I suppose. This meant I couldn't trust my usual senses. Joke's on you, security mechanism thingy. Telepathy for the win. I had used my budding telepathic sense to find Miss Martian's hiding place during the absolutely cakewalk of a fight that was me versus them. I didn't see why I couldn't use it now to find Masali and the others. I doubt whatever was actively messing with my senses could account for mind power. I cleared my throat and locked my inner weeb back in his cage. To concentrate better, I sat cross-legged in mid-air. The position was one I was most familiar with and made me relax. Without wasting more time, I flicked my switch on my mental awareness radar and tried to stretch it out as far as I could. Sweat started falling down my forehead after a minute, as I strained this power more than I ever had before. Unfortunately, nothing registered in my telepathy. The range was too small. About 70 meters or so. I massaged my forehead, knowing that each time I spent trying to find the warriors was more time Masali's stupid impulsive actions got more of them killed. I had to change tactics. What if, an idea came to me. I didn't know if it would work or not, but here we go. Instead of stretching my range out, I sent a pulse out. A sperm whale can locate prey up to 500 meters away. I used that same principle but applied it to my telepathy. A wave of psionic energy escaped my mind, spreading out across the whole space. Through this, my range was expanded exponentially because I wasn't struggling to maintain the pulse, just to read whatever it bounced off of. I grinned. Gotcha. A little over 300 meters away to my right, over 20 minds registered in my telepathy. I changed course and shot off like a rocket. My brows scrunched up a little because before I had completely cut off my telepathic pulse sense, I caught the flavor of a few familiar minds. It was probably nothing. Maybe my inexperience with the skill. Just to be sure though, I sent another pulse out. Nothing unusual registered in my senses, so I increased my speed towards Masali. General point of view. Guys. Aden's here. Miss Martian informed the others. The atmosphere in the ship suddenly changed. A sharp intake of breath from Artemis, Kid Flash narrowing his eyes and Superboy tightening his fingers into fists. Should we call it in? Artemis asked, already knowing what the answer would be. Everybody looked towards Aqualad. There was a brief silence from the team leader. Aqualad closed his eyes and thought it through. Aden's presence here showed that this mission had changed from a simple search to something else. Who could he be working for? Time and time again, Aqualad saw what being a leader actually was. While it was a noble position to have the team's trust placed on him, he couldn't help but see it as a burden. Protocol dictates they were supposed to report it, but this is what they had been waiting for. A chance to bring him back. In cuffs or not didn't matter. No. We continue the mission. A few adjustments are to be made, however. Miss Martian and Artemis, you are to stay in the bioship. Do a scan of the whole valley and see if you can spot our target or any of his people. You will also be our eyes in the sky. The rest, we will be confronting our wayward teammate. There's a high chance that Lisbon might be who Aden's after. Or at the very least have information on his disappearance. Artemis looked ready to argue but instead settled for a curt nod. She would only be a liability. Superboy, on the other hand, was feeling the opposite. He was ready to prove once and for all that he wasn't weak. He patted the noticeable bulge in his pants pocket. A gift from his other father. He had wanted to report it to Superman, to take the patches that suppressed his human D.N.A to grant him his full Kryptonian abilities to him and confess. What stopped him was the humiliation from before. He could remember getting swatted off the sky like an insignificant fly by Aden. His super strength made useless upon clashing with the other boy and finding him more than a match for Connor's Kryptonian strength and durability. Aden had been playing with him during their sparring matches. Superboy had even gone as far as to review some of their sparring matches footage, and what he saw made him even more sure that Aden had been hiding his true power. Maelstrom would barely be breathing hard while Connor would be on his last legs. The matches with Robin, Artemis, and Black Canary revealed more of Aden's hidden depths. He took to every match with a clinical and surgical approach. A glint on his eyes that showed you, even if you put him down now, don't expect the same thing to work next time. So Connor had come to the conclusion that there was no way he could beat Aden in pure skill. The guy was a monster in versatility. Instead, Connor decided to do so by overwhelming power. The D.N. Apaches were staying with him. Just until they brought Aden back, he promised himself. Chapter 86, The Hunt Part 2. Aden's point of view. I get it. People are dumb sometimes. People are more often than not impulsive when caught in a sticky situation. That all makes sense. What doesn't make sense is when you insist on being stubborn despite knowing you're in the wrong. I flew down and touched down on a tree branch, looking down at Masaline close to 30 teens, the exact number being 28. The group had arrived very close to the cave. They were hiding in a thicket while looking up at the rocky path leading up to the cave, which was only a few hundred meters away. Not too close and not too far out of earshot. Despite it being at nighttime, bones belonging to animals and humans were scattered about, along with patches of dried blood going up the path. I closed my eyes and said a little prayer to the ones who had lost their lives here. Then I refocused on the stupid entitled fool about to risk the lives of his friends for petty revenge. Revenge is not bad, but you only take vengeance when you know you have the power to see it through. Now back to my earlier point. Masali was staring down at one of the older teens, who seemed to be his second in command. I didn't understand what they were saying, but from the older boy's body language and expressions, it was clear he was hesitant about confronting Nemeth in his lair. Smart. Unfortunately, Masali was too blinded by rage and revenge that he couldn't see how bad his idea was. For now, I decided to stay hidden while keeping a lookout on the cave. If Masali chose to listen to common sense and turn back, all the better. I could then go inside the cave, murder the shit out of Nemeth and then be outta here. General point of view. They were elites. Sons of the garden. In their veins flowed the blood of their brave ancestors who had never given up or failed in their sacred duty. It didn't matter that they were young. It didn't matter that they were inexperienced. All that mattered was survival and revenge. Most of them gathered had lost family to this demon. All the premier warriors. The strongest the village had to offer, dead. They might have been lacking in strength, but their hearts burned true. The flames of their spirits was inextinguishable. A raging inferno. At least that had been the case before they had arrived. The instant the group had made it within vicinity of the cave, all their courage had disappeared. The bones littered around and splotches of blood were just the tip of the iceberg. Nothing to the feeling the ground gave off. An air of despair, pain and bloodthirst. Their eyes had widened and many had taken a step back, shivering in absolute terror. One of the warriors standing next to Masali, a tall stalwart young man, tightened his hand on his weapon. He turned and addressed their leader. Tunapaswa kuguka turudi. Haya likawa wazombaya. We should turn and go back. This was a bad idea. Masali turned and glared at the person who had made the suggestion. His second in command. He also looked behind him and noticed that almost everyone was of the same stance. Masali could feel it too. The knowledge that they were standing so close to death. Of course he knew the idea was bad. They should have waited for his uncle to finish communing with the ancestors before moving out. Yet something had forced him to throw caution to the wind. Something he couldn't explain. All he knew was that he couldn't turn back. Turning back meant giving up after everything. Giving up on his father. Shaming his memory by not avenging him. Ancestors be with me. Masali turned to the others with cold eyes. We are not retreating. That is an order. He informed them in their native language. The faces of some of the boys became ashen. I don't want to die. One of the younger boys whimpered, letting his weapon fall down. He took a step back, fear coating his visage. Masali's face contorted in a rictus of anger. You coward! What do you think you're doing? You shame our forefathers by letting go of your weapon. He marched towards the kid and slapped him. The young boy fell down in a heap and curled on himself. Ntangai, Masali's second in command, became angry and pulled back their leader from further hurting the boy. The son of the chieftain rounded up on the second in command in disbelief. Insubordination? You too. Ntangai, heedless of Masali's anger, came between him and the boy. The other warriors also walked behind him. Looking around, Masali was shocked to find himself all alone. With all due respect, that's not how you treat a comrade, Masali. We have always followed your lead. Hunting, training, and carrying our duties. And you have never been this cruel. All of us lost our loved ones, just like you, so why? Instead of compassion and understanding, you treat us as mere subordinates. Are you that eager to lead us to our deaths? With each word that fell, Masali felt as if explosions were going off inside his brain. All this time, they were right. Why was he doing this? He loved his father, but that did not justify leading his compatriots to the battle with a half-baked plan. Doubt started appearing on his face. His voice seized up as a voice sounded in his brain. Now, my young puppet. It's not time for you to start rebelling yet. I still need the distraction. Plus, my pet needs a meal. Ha 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 ha. A dark and sinister voice told him telepathically, laughing in glee at what was about to happen. A haze appeared on Masali's face. He looked up and stared at the faces of his men impassively. He raised his hand slowly and pointed the palm towards them. Ntangai, seeing the look on Masali's face, had a bad feeling. Oh, ancestors! Everybody get back! He shouted as the ground started rumbling. Traitors! Masali said and clenched a fist. Blackened vines exploded out of the ground, aimed to skewer everybody present. Ntangai couldn't believe it, his friend, brother all but in blood. Masali! Was his last thought, knowing he couldn't hope to escape this. Slink! The sharp whistle of a blade cutting through the air was heard. A few seconds later all the vines aimed to constrict or skewer through the others were promptly cut apart. A breeze blew out. A red and yellow blur moved through the ground carrying away the warriors out of Masali's range. The son of the chieftain looked on in anger as someone interrupted him. Who dares? He shouted to the forest. A familiar figure stepped out from the edge of the forest and stood before him, tall and imposing. Masali's eyes widened and he stepped back. You? Yes. Me. And if you know what's good for you, you will surrender, or better yet don't. I have a lot of rage piling up and I need a way to unleash it. The figure said. Aden's point of view. My mind was buzzing with anger. That red and yellow blur, Kid Flash. The team were here. I felt it out with my air sense and located them hiding in the jungle. Waiting and watching as I approached Masali. Some of them shivering in nervous energy. Only one of them a true threat. Connor was registering as strong in my nascent energy sense. Strange. I could feel the fluctuations of telepathic communications going on among the three of them. Going by what I knew of Aqualad's strategy, the three were probably him, Superboy and Kid Flash. Robin was inching towards the cave on my left side, trying to move while undetected. Miss Martian and Artemis were most likely on the bio ship, providing air support. Par the course with Aqualad's uninspired and cliché tactics. Well, if it ain't broken. Superboy, wait. I heard the order through the vibrations in the air. Of course, Connor wanted to jump in, like he always does. Did they follow me here? The nerve and not to mention the stupidity, I inhaled a shuddering breath, calming myself down. I had a mission I needed to carry out first. Once I was down beating the stupidity out of Masali, I would confront them. And this time, they better hope to God they don't attack me first. I am out of mercies to give. I spread out my telepathic awareness, making myself a beacon of psionic energy in a way that any 2-bit telepath like me or a prodigy like Miss Martian could locate the transmission. After a few seconds, I felt a link established between us. No one said anything for a few seconds then. Stay the fuck out of my way, Aqualad. This time I'll make sure the least injury you and your team gets will land you in the infirmary for a month. After giving the warning, I cut off the transmission and turned my attention back to the chief's son. Masali looked angry at my words. I narrowed my eyes when he started huffing. Sweat dripped down his forehead and his eyes looked unfocused. His hands shook as well. I spared a look at the blackened vines I had cut through with my long knives and air bending. The vines were seeping with corruption and taint. Something was up. You foreigners bring nothing but trouble. My father couldn't see you outsiders for what you actually are, a threat that needs to be dealt with extreme prejudice. I raised my eyebrow. He could now talk in English? Communicating with him earlier had been a problem. That's unexpected. Then again, he could have learnt it from his uncle. Yet, all these inconsistencies added up to paint a worrisome picture. Nemeth was a demon and demons possess people. Could that be the case? I needed to get up close to find out. I hid the hand holding the long knife behind my back and sighed. I get it. You're angry, frustrated, and you want to revenge on whatever killed your father. But this is not the way to go. I stalled, walking closer. I could have easily used a number of techniques to take him down, but I wanted to know if my suspicions were correct. Getting close to him, an overpowering stench of sulfur pervaded the air. I scrunched up my nose. Dark-colored veins covered his hands and glowing yellow light flashed in his eyes. Fuck. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Masali shouted. I have heard enough. From you. From my uncle. From everybody. No one tells me what to do. And with that final shout, the ground started trembling. I looked at the mouth of the cave. Stones started falling apart and rolling down the hill. Something was coming. My attention was briefly removed from the self-entitled arrogant young master before me, to see what this new threat was. My eyes widened. Whoa, this just went from comic book world to full-on White Walker and Wits bullshit. I call foul. My blades ignited with fire. From the mouth of the cave, dead animals and humans dressed the same as Masali and his warrior group came out, and trust me, they were very much dead. Their eyes were unfocused, and even from there the smell of rot was overpowering. The misshapen forms of zombies stumbled aimlessly around. An animalistic roar sounded from behind them. The zombies instantly went on focus. Their heads turned towards us. Then, with a rush/stampede that reminded me of World War Z, they ran down the hill en masse. Holy shit! Kid Flash commented. Him, Aqualad and Superboy had come out of hiding. They kept a respectable distance between us. Smart. Despite the circumstances, I didn't know if I could keep myself from punching Kid Flash's lights out. Well, now I understand why the mission was rated as hard. This marks the end of part 28 of the story, Avatar in DC Universe. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.